Have you ever finished a meal and felt your energy rise, only to collapse an hour later into fog, shakiness, or sudden hunger? What if that surge and crash is not inevitable aging, but a signal your metabolism is asking for something remarkably simple? Hi, I'm Dr. Melina, a physician and longevity researcher, and today I want to explore a quiet possibility hiding in plain sight, that the answer to blood sugar chaos may not begin in a pharmacy, but in a spice jar. After 60, insulin signaling often becomes less responsive, a condition researchers call insulin resistance. Glucose lingers longer in the bloodstream. The pancreas compensates by releasing more insulin. The result can feel like a roller coaster: sharp rises, sudden drops, reactive hypoglycemia, fatigue. Studies consistently show that repeated post-meal spikes are associated with vascular stress and long-term metabolic strain. Yet most conversations focus only on medication escalation. But what if there were another layer to this story? There is a specific variety of cinnamon, not the common grocery store kind, that research suggests may support insulin sensitivity and slow carbohydrate absorption. And there is another type that, when used daily, contains high levels of coumarin, a compound linked to liver toxicity in excessive amounts. Two spices, two biological paths. Could something so ordinary truly influence something so critical? Because once you understand the difference, everything begins to change. That difference became deeply personal for Robert, a 67-year-old retired engineer who described his days as predictable chaos. Breakfast would send his glucose soaring. 2 hours later, he felt shaky, irritable, hollow. Have you ever noticed how a blood sugar crash doesn't just affect the body, but your mood, your patience, even your confidence? Robert's physician prescribed acarbose, a medication designed to slow carbohydrate absorption by inhibiting alpha-glucosidase enzymes in the gut. Mechanistically, it made sense. By delaying carbohydrate breakdown, post-meal spikes could be reduced. Clinical trials show it can blunt postprandial glucose elevations. But physiology is never isolated from experience. Within days, Robert developed bloating, cramping, and urgent diarrhea, common gastrointestinal side effects documented in trials. He told me, "I traded one problem for another." And there was the cost, nearly $300 per month, more than $3,000 a year, to dampen a spike that still wasn't fully controlled. His glucose monitor continued to trace jagged peaks and sudden drops. The roller coaster persisted. What troubled him most was not the numbers, it was the unpredictability, the sense that his body was no longer cooperating with him. So he asked a simple question that many people over 60 quietly wonder: is there a way to steady this system without overwhelming it? That question opened a door, not into alternative mysticism, but into biochemistry hiding in a familiar bark. Because sometimes the solution isn't stronger suppression, but smarter modulation. To understand what happened next, we have to step inside the body, into the choreography that unfolds every time you eat. Carbohydrates are broken down into glucose, absorbed through the small intestine and released into the bloodstream. Insulin, secreted by the pancreas, acts like a molecular key, binding to insulin receptors so glucose can enter muscle and liver cells. In a healthy system, this rise and fall is smooth, almost musical. But after 60, that signaling can falter. Insulin receptors become less responsive, a phenomenon known as insulin resistance.
The pancreas compensates by releasing more insulin, sometimes overshooting. The result? A rapid drop in blood sugar after the spike, what clinicians call reactive hypoglycemia. Have you ever felt that sudden wave of weakness or brain fog and wondered why it arrives so quickly? Research shows that repeated post-meal glucose elevations are associated with oxidative stress and endothelial dysfunction, processes linked to vascular aging. Monnier et al., 2006. Many clinicians aim to keep postprandial glucose within controlled ranges to reduce strain on nerves, kidneys, and blood vessels. Yet the focus is often on suppressing the spike rather than improving the body's responsiveness. Imagine your cells not as broken locks, but hesitant listeners. What if the goal is not to flood them with more insulin, but to help them hear the signal again? Because when communication inside the body improves, the roller coaster doesn't need to be forced to stop. It begins to slow on its own.
And this is where aging becomes more than a number. It becomes biology we can observe. After 60, muscle mass gradually declines, mitochondrial efficiency shifts, and low-grade inflammation can interfere with insulin signaling. The result is not sudden failure, but subtle resistance. Glucose lingers longer in circulation, the pancreas works harder, the vascular system absorbs the strain. Studies link repeated post-meal glucose elevations with microvascular stress, including damage to delicate endothelial cells that line blood vessels. Over time, this stress is associated with neuropathy, kidney strain, and retinal vulnerability. Not overnight, quietly, incrementally. Have you ever wondered how something you cannot feel in the moment can shape the next decade of your life? Many people assume fasting glucose alone tells the story, yet research shows that postprandial spikes may contribute independently to long-term metabolic risk. The roller coaster is not just uncomfortable, it is biologically loud. But here's the deeper question. What if aging metabolism is not simply declining, but miscommunicating? What if cells are not incapable, but less sensitive? In physiology, small improvements in insulin receptor responsiveness can create disproportionate stability. A slight delay in gastric emptying can flatten a spike. A modest enhancement in glucose uptake can prevent a crash. What if the solution isn't to overpower the system, but to nudge it? Because sometimes restoring balance begins with identifying what quietly disrupts it. And in Robert's case, that discovery started with a closer look at cinnamon itself. Cinnamon is not a single substance, it is a category. And within that category lie two very different biological stories. The cinnamon most commonly sold in supermarkets is Cassia, derived from Cinnamomum cassia. It is darker, thicker, more pungent, and it contains relatively high levels of coumarin, a naturally occurring compound that, in large or chronic doses, has been associated with liver toxicity in susceptible individuals. Regulatory agencies in Europe have established tolerable daily intake limits for coumarin because excessive exposure may strain hepatic detoxification pathways. Have you ever checked which type sits in your kitchen right now? Then there is Ceylon cinnamon, Cinnamomum verum, often called true cinnamon. Its bark is lighter, layered like delicate parchment, softer in texture, subtly sweet. Chemically, it contains dramatically lower coumarin levels, often described in the literature as negligible compared to cassia. Two trees, two phytochemical profiles, two risk landscapes. This distinction is rarely discussed in routine dietary advice, yet it matters profoundly when cinnamon is used daily.
One version may accumulate unwanted compounds over time, the other appears far safer for consistent culinary use. But safety alone does not make something effective. What makes Ceylon cinnamon intriguing is not just what it lacks, but what it contains: bioactive polyphenols and cinnamonaldehyde compounds that appear to influence insulin receptor signaling and glucose transport. And when those molecules interact with the digestive system, something subtle begins to shift. Could the right bark truly alter the blood sugar curve?
Inside Ceylon cinnamon are compounds that do more than flavor food. Polyphenols and cinnamaldehyde appear to interact with insulin receptor pathways, enhancing phosphorylation processes that help cells respond more efficiently to circulating insulin. In simple terms, they may make the cellular lock more responsive to the hormonal key. Some clinical trials have reported reductions in fasting blood glucose within a moderate range among adults with impaired glucose metabolism. Khan et al., 2003, though results vary across studies. Cinnamon has also been observed to slow modestly gastric emptying, the rate at which food leaves the stomach and enters the small intestine. Helibowitz et al., 2007. That delay can translate into a more gradual glucose absorption curve. Instead of a sharp spike, the rise becomes steadier. Instead of an abrupt crash, the descent softens. Have you ever considered how timing inside the gut can echo hours later in your energy? Unlike a carbose, which directly inhibits carbohydrate digesting enzymes and often causes fermentation-related discomfort, cinnamon's influence appears more modulatory than suppressive. It does not block digestion outright. It seems to whisper to it. In Robert's case, this distinction mattered. He did not need forceful inhibition. He needed smoother signaling. Of course, cinnamon is not a pharmaceutical agent, and responses differ across individuals. But when insulin sensitivity improves even slightly, the metabolic ripple can be meaningful. The question became, what would happen if this influence were present at every meal, consistently, predictably, in real time? Because biology responds not just to intensity, but to repetition. Robert decided to test consistency rather than intensity. Instead of taking something stronger, he chose something steadier, Ceylon cinnamon with each meal. The reasoning was simple. If cinnamon's compounds support insulin receptor sensitivity and modestly slow gastric emptying, they must be present when carbohydrates enter the system. Timing, after all, is physiology. Within the first few days, his continuous glucose monitor began tracing a different pattern. The peaks were still there, but they rose less aggressively. The descents no longer plunged. By the end of the first week, the dramatic oscillations that once left him shaky had softened into smaller waves. Have you ever watched a storm settle into a steady tide? Clinical research on cinnamon supplementation shows variable outcomes, but several controlled trials suggest improvements in fasting glucose and markers of glycemic control over weeks to months in certain populations. Allen et al., 2013. Not every study shows dramatic change. Yet patterns emerge, particularly when use is consistent. What fascinated Robert most was not a single reading. It was the absence of crashes. The mid-afternoon fog that once dictated his schedule began to fade. His energy stabilized. His mood followed. Of course, 1 week does not rewrite decades of metabolic adaptation, but it can reveal direction, and direction matters. Because when the roller coaster slows, the body begins conserving energy it once spent compensating. And that opens a deeper question. How exactly should something so simple be integrated to maximize its biological presence? Integration is where intention becomes biology.
The principle is not excess, it is presence. Cinnamon's potential influence appears most relevant when it accompanies carbohydrate exposure, meeting glucose as it enters circulation. Without that timing, its modulatory effects may be diluted. In practice, this means incorporating Ceylon cinnamon into meals rather than taking it in isolation hours later. Mixed into oatmeal, stirred into coffee, blended into yogurt, added to smoothies, or folded into savory dishes like roasted vegetables or warm lentils, its role is culinary, not clinical. Have you ever noticed how small daily rituals shape outcomes more than occasional grand gestures? The quantity used in research varies widely, and responses differ among individuals. Some studies examining metabolic markers have used daily doses ranging from 1 to several grams, Allen et al., 2013. What matters most in observational patterns is consistency over time. The digestive system must encounter those polyphenols during carbohydrate breakdown for the interaction to occur. This is not about megadosing or replacing prescribed care. It is about understanding that metabolic signaling responds to rhythm. When something supportive is present at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, the cumulative effect may differ from sporadic use. Robert approached it not as a miracle, but as a protocol of steadiness. And within weeks, another measurable shift began to emerge, not just in daily curves, but in longer-term markers that reflect the story of 3 months. What would those numbers reveal? 3 months later, the data told a broader story. Robert's A1C, a marker reflecting average blood glucose over roughly 90 days, shifted downward from 7.8% to 6.9%. One number does not define a person, and many variables influence A1C, including diet, activity, sleep, and medication adjustments. But trends matter. Patterns matter. Have you ever watched a long-term graph bend gently in a new direction and felt hope rise with it? Daily stability had already improved. The violent oscillations were gone. His energy no longer hinged on emergency snacks. Even his physician noted the smoother postprandial curves recorded on his monitor. Clinical literature examining cinnamon supplementation has shown mixed but sometimes favorable effects on glycemic markers in adults with type 2 diabetes. Not universal, not absolute, but meaningful for some. Financially, the contrast was stark. Acarbose had cost him nearly $3,600 annually. High-quality Ceylon cinnamon cost a fraction of that, closer to the price of a monthly coffee habit. Cost alone does not determine value. Effectiveness and safety must lead the conversation. Yet, accessibility changes who can participate in prevention. This is not a narrative of rebellion against medicine. It is a reminder that nutrition science and pharmacology are not enemies. They operate on different levers of the same biology. And that raises an uncomfortable question. If something inexpensive and natural shows potential in research, why is it rarely centered in the conversation? Because the answer lies not in conspiracy, but in structure. Medicine is trained to diagnose, to stratify risk, to intervene when pathology crosses defined thresholds. Pharmaceutical agents pass through rigorous funding pipelines, large randomized trials, regulatory review. Spices do not. Nutritional compounds rarely attract billion-dollar research investments, and most physicians receive limited formal training in applied nutrition science. The result is not suppression, it is structural emphasis. When guidelines are written, they prioritize interventions supported by large-scale, multi-center trials.
Cinnamon studies, while promising in certain cohorts, are often smaller, heterogeneous, or vary in preparation and dosage. That inconsistency makes sweeping recommendations difficult. Have you ever considered how evidence hierarchy shapes what becomes standard practice? There is also the issue of standardization. A tablet contains a precise milligram dose. A teaspoon of cinnamon may vary in density, origin, or phytochemical composition. Medicine prefers uniformity. Nature prefers variability. Yet none of this invalidates emerging research. It simply explains why conversations about insulin sensitivity tend to orbit prescriptions rather than pantry shelves. Robert's physician did not dismiss his experiment. Instead, they monitored his markers carefully. That partnership, observation, data, safety, transformed skepticism into curiosity. This is not about replacing medical care. It is about expanding awareness within it. Because when patients become informed participants in their own biology, something shifts beyond glucose curves. A deeper stability begins to form. And stability, especially after 60, is a form of quiet power. Stability is not dramatic. It does not announce itself with fireworks or overnight transformation. It feels almost ordinary. Steady mornings, clear afternoons, evenings without the tremor of sudden hunger. And yet, metabolically, steadiness is profound. When glucose rises gradually and falls predictably, oxidative stress is reduced, endothelial strain softens, and insulin signaling becomes less frantic. The body conserves energy it once spent correcting extremes. Ceylon cinnamon is not a cure. It is not a substitute for comprehensive medical care. But research suggests it may support insulin sensitivity and modulate post-meal glucose responses in certain individuals when used consistently. The distinction between Cassia and Ceylon matters for safety, especially with regular use. The conversation with a qualified clinician matters even more, particularly if medications are involved, because any meaningful shift in glucose patterns deserves supervision. Have you ever considered that empowerment in health does not begin with rebellion, but with refinement? With asking better questions? With examining the details, even the label on a spice jar? Robert did not overthrow medicine, he partnered with it. He replaced volatility with rhythm, and over time, his numbers reflected that rhythm. The deeper message is not about cinnamon alone. It is about understanding how small, biologically intelligent choices accumulate, about recognizing that after 60, your metabolism is still listening. Sometimes it is not asking for something stronger, it is asking for something steadier.